Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Ava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Bharadhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Balava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishwad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Status Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki. Sri Giri Govardhan Ki. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Gopremanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva. Verse 13. Prachina Barhisha Putra Shatadrutyam Dashabhavan Tulya Nama Vrata Sarve Dharma Snata Prachetasa Prachina Barhisha Putra Shatadrutyam Dashabhavan Tulyanama Vrata Sarve Dharmasnata Prachetasa Prachina Barhisha Putra Shatadrutyam Dashabhavan Tulyanama Vrata Sarve Dharmasnata Prachetasa Prachina Barhisha Putra Shatadrutyam Dashabhavan Tulyanama Vrata Sarve Dharmasnata Prachetasa. Prachinabarhisha, of King Prachinabarhi, Putra, sons, Shatadrutyam, in the womb of Shatadruti, Dasa, 10, Abhavan, became manifest, Tulya, equally, Nama, name, Vrata, vow, Sarve, all, Dharma, religiosity, Snata, completely merged in, Prachetasa, all of them being designated as Prachetas. Translation: King Prachinabarhi begot 10 children in the womb of Shatadruti. All of them were equally endowed with religiosity, and all of them were known as the Prachetas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Dharmasnata is significant, for the 10 children were all merged in the practice of religion. In addition, they possessed all good qualities. One is supposed to be perfect when one is perfectly religious, perfect in the execution of one's vows to render devotional service, perfect in knowledge, perfect in good behavior, and so on. All the Prachetas were on the same level of perfection. Prachinabarhisha putra shatadrutyam dasha bhavan. Tulyanama vrata sarve dharmasnata prachetasa. King Prachinabarhi begot 10 children in the womb of Shatadruti. All of them were equally endowed with religiosity, and all of them were known as the Prachetas. Nama Om Vishnupade Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Pastyacha Deshatarane Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, well, continuing the descriptions related to King Prachinabarhi or King Prachinabarhishat, and what a special person he was. And here, the first mention is made of the Prachetas. The Prachetas are very special people, and we'll see as the chapter goes on and the whole narration goes on that there are all sorts of wonderful things which happen with them. And indeed, for that matter, just for your information, what is it now? Oh, well, anyway. There are so many points that arise about the Prachetas. They're really very unique persons. So anyway, here the particular point is that Prachinabarhi, he begot 10 children, 10 boys. Prachinabarhisha putra. the verse says. So 10 sons in the womb of Shatadruti, and all of them were equally endowed with auspiciousness, qualifications, and just wonderful qualities and characteristics like that. And Prabhupada's making the point that for a person to be considered, well, ultimately perfect, for a person to be considered actually perfect, they have to have, well, all good qualities. And there are many. Srila Prabhupada just mentions a few here. One should be perfectly religious, perfect in carrying out your vows within devotional service, perfect in knowledge, perfect in good behavior. And then he says, Prabhupada says, and so on. In other words, there is a number of other particular features of a person, characteristics and aspects of their personalities and so on like that, which are really very, very wonderful. And ideally, at least, if a person is to be considered perfect, they need to have all of these. Otherwise, they will not exactly be perfect. They may be very nice and very qualified in so many ways, but they wouldn't really be considered perfect. So the thing is that the basic, most sort of foundational point here is that by practicing devotional service, then a person, any person, does come to the level of perfection in life. Devotional service is really the key. There are many people who have nice qualifications in different ways, being very gentle and not offensive, being very appreciative, able to see the good qualities of others and really glorify those. So these things are all very nice. But if such a person doesn't have devotional service, then inevitably there are going to be some shortcomings, and those shortcomings will be so significant that the person at least cannot be considered perfect. But not just that, that lack of devotional service will be the sort of the catalyst, the cause of the person sooner or later falling down. It may not even perhaps be in this lifetime, but sooner or later that will happen to the person. The person will fall down, meaning that they'll lose their good qualities and just become gross materialists sooner or later. And once that happens, then it's not long before the person really falls down into animal life and just really down into the wheel of samsara, of birth and death. This is inevitable, actually. Not that it necessarily will just happen overnight, but it will happen. Unless, of course, at some point the person does actually come to Krishna consciousness, and then everything is saved. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in Madhurya Kadambini, it's a very interesting description of how to see devotees, that there are 26 qualities of a devotee. One of the qualities is essential, and the others are marginal. But they're very nice, but they're marginal, but they're not essential. The marginal qualities include such things as speaking very nicely, even poetically actually, and being kind, and being humble, and things like this, which if we really just consider them in and of themselves, they are basically characteristics of the mode of goodness. And mode of goodness, certainly a lot better than passion and ignorance. But without the essential quality, then even all 25 of those marginal secondary qualities, they are not really of great importance. So what is that essential qualification? It's called Krishna Akarshani, being attached to Krishna. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes the point that generally speaking, devotees, people who have that quality, they also have the other 25 qualities, or many of them, or in so many cases, all of them, at least to one degree or another, or in the case of very advanced devotees, to very great degrees. Even in the very advanced devotees, even perfectly, as Prabhupada is using this word perfect here. Yes, so it works like that. But then Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur raises the question, or the point, that some devotees, seeing that another devotee, some particular devotee, has that quality of Krishna Akarshani, but doesn't have the other 25 qualities, even just really doesn't have the other 25 qualities. So therefore, some devotees observing that devotee may think that, well, this person is, for example, not poetic, does not speak in nice ways, and is not humble, but has a sort of different perception of themselves, and not patient, impatient, and intolerant, and etc., etc. One can look through those. Those qualities are listed out here and there in Prabhupada's books. So the devotees, seeing that devotee who's attached to Krishna, but sort of gross, loud, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, loud and etc., etc. Have a look through the list, and you'll get the idea very clearly. So then, but those devotees observing may think that, who is this devotee? He shouldn't be taken seriously as a devotee because he's just got some unpleasantness there in ways which in devotional service they often will not be appreciated. So therefore they may decide that this person, this devotee, is not really a devotee. And therefore, it is acceptable for us, sort of, you could say, like regular practitioners, it is acceptable for us to offend that devotee or that person. And because the person is just so lacking in those 25 qualities, even though he's got some attachment to Krishna, but we can overlook that or minimize it at least. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes the point strongly that this is not good. This is bad. This is a very serious mistake. To underestimate someone who is actually attached to Krishna, but has some shortage, at least, or maybe just tremendous shortage of however many or even all of the secondary qualities. And when our devotees, our American devotees, if we can call them that, just for the sake of sort of a reference point, when they first went to India, then quite a number, particularly of like the Brahmins and the pujaris and people of that, in those categories, they really didn't appreciate the American, or just say Western devotees, but particularly at the Americans, because Americans, Hare Krishna, at least they say, it is said by some people, and there may be something in it, in a certain sense, that Americans, so many are sort of very brash and loud, and particularly like British people who often pride themselves on their culture and their character and their niceness, etc. Yeah, I mean, even to this day, there's no shortage of British people who really look down on Americans in general. Hare Krishna. Such is life in the material world. Yes, so in India, some of these devotees would come, and in the middle of, things are going on in the usual sort of peaceful ways, but suddenly there's this loudness, etc. And people thought, what? Who on earth? What is going on here? Who are these people? And in fact, there's a little story that one devotee, his body born in America, let us put it that way, went to one of the main temples in Vrindavan and spent a little time there and interacted a little bit with the pujari. Of course, he only spoke English, but anyway, that's not too bad. And was pleasant and gentle and sort of respectful, etc., etc. And the pujari said to him just before the devotee left that, you're actually quite nice. Surprise, surprise. You're actually quite nice. He said, if you carry on like this, then in your next life, you may be able to become a pujari, like here, of these deities. And the devotee thought, wow, really? Okay. And went back and told Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada asked him, what did you say then? How did you respond? What was your reply? And the devotee said, well, nothing really. I just said Hare Krishna or whatever. Prabhupada said, well, you should have told him that if you keep doing this deity worship very nicely, then in your next life, you may be able to become an ISKCON devotee. oh, Krishna, this material world and the modes. And usually the mode of goodness is appreciated, generally, much more than the mode of passion or the mode of ignorance. But the thing is that the material mode of goodness, as opposed to Shuddha Sattva, the actual transcendental, pure goodness, which is not contaminated by any touch of anything material at all, but the material mode of goodness has some serious problems. One way it's described is that when a person is in the mode of goodness, then they're very peaceful. And one of the main qualities that just naturally manifests in a person who's who's really in the mode of goodness is that person becomes happy. That's described there in Bhagavad Gita. They become happy. And it's not a sort of gross happiness like, enjoying some intoxication or something like that. It's like a very pleasant type of happiness, kind of quite a rich type of happiness. But what is described is that person in the mode of goodness who has that sort of happiness and is relishing it, he's enjoying it, but this material world being what it is, one encounters different situations and their challenges. And so that person who's in the mode of goodness may find that under certain circumstances, like, difficult circumstances, he cannot hold on to his happiness. And he becomes upset, influenced by whatever's going on, some sort of even just slightly dramatic event which happens. So, therefore, that person in the mode of goodness finds after a while that he or she has to really sort of be careful about maintaining the happiness, because sometimes it gets undermined by some association, or if there's some drama going on, something hectic happens, then he finds or she finds they just lose their happiness, at least for some time, because they're still susceptible to the modes. It's not that they're beyond the modes. So then they have to make an effort to stay in the mode of goodness or get back into that happiness sometimes. Otherwise they find they lose the happiness due to the circumstances. So the description then is that by having to make that effort to remain in the happiness of the mode of goodness, they then enter the mode of passion, having to sort of work hard, make an effort to maintain the happiness, and then they fall down into the mode of passion, step by step. But it happens because, as Lord Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, the modes are competing with each other, you could say. Sometimes goodness is more prominent, but then passion comes up. And then after a while, ignorance comes up. And so there's this fluctuation. And therefore, to remain in any one of the modes, but particularly in the mode of goodness, which is the highest and most pure in this very impure material world, you can't maintain it indefinitely. It cannot be maintained indefinitely. It's not possible. Sooner or later it will be undermined by passion or ignorance, something like this. So, yes, therefore, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes this point that even if a person is really lacking, like, even a little prominently lacking in these secondary qualities, which in and of themselves, just taken, each one taken in and of itself, they're qualities of goodness. But if they're not sort of underpinned, and there isn't like a real foundation of Krishna akarshana, of real attachment to Krishna, then it's not good. But if a person is attached to Krishna, of course, if they become offensive, that can become another thing. But as long as they don't become offensive, then they must be respected and taken seriously as devotees. Yes, so these prachetas, putra, the sons of Prachana Barhisha, they had, as Prabhupada says, they possessed all good qualities. They were merged in the practice of religion. They possessed all good qualities, and so on like that. And all of them, all 10 of them, Prabhupada says all the prachetas were on the same level of perfection. Yes, and of course, they were perfectly religious, but they were also perfect in the execution of devotional service and their determination to render devotional service. And so therefore, their perfection can be taken very seriously, and as long as they really stick at their Krishna consciousness, then as persons, as devotees, they will just sort of grow and grow and develop and develop. We know in Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, verse 40, Lord Krishna makes the very important point, chapter 2, verse 40. Neha Vikramanashosti Prachavayana Vijate Swalpamapyasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bhayat. That in this endeavor, means in Krishna consciousness, there's no loss or diminution, there's no reduction. And just a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear, which is to fall down into animal life. That's the most dangerous type of fear, because once you're in animal life, that's it for the time being. We were reading just the other day that it's only possible in the human form of life to become Krishna conscious. For the animals, it's just not possible. They just don't have the facility within themselves. I mean, occasionally you get some dogs, there have been a few dogs, who've been very attached to devotees. But otherwise, in general, once you're in an animal species, you got to wait until you come back to the human level again. But this chapter 2, verse 40 is making the point. The particular point is really that if a person dies before, as devotees, but then they leave their bodies before they have really come to that point from which they can go back to Godhead. They haven't really achieved perfection in Krishna consciousness. But then, that's not so bad. It's not so bad because in their next life they'll get further opportunity. Krishna discusses this, of course. Such a person may be born in a very pious family, just in a broad sense, a pious family, or a wealthy family where you don't have to get, into like working like a dog. You can just, things are provided for you. So you can be born in such a situation. And under those circumstances, Hare Krishna, you can make further advancement. And after some time, you may be born in a devotee family, and then you may really take up Krishna consciousness very seriously and go back to Godhead. That's the idea Krishna describes there. But of course, we should not be, and no one should be complacent in that sense, that, well, if I don't make it in this lifetime, next lifetime, I'm going to be born in some suitable situation, so no need to stress about it. But the problem is, that even when people who have obviously been devotees in their previous lifetimes, when they're born in the families even of great devotees, they can still get sidetracked. It's not that difficult to get sidetracked from Krishna consciousness in this material world. And of course, classic example, well, there is a number of classic examples. Srila Prabhupada had his children, 4 or 5 children, and one of them was nice. At least one of them, he definitely was nice. And he appreciated ISKCON, and he appreciated Prabhupada as a devotee, not just as his father. And he would come in and participate every now and then in ISKCON. I remember him coming to Mayapur once during the sort of the meetings and festival time, and you look at him and you think, gosh, looks like a young version of Srila Prabhupada. Really, he really did look like that. But then the others, and particularly one of them was an outright demon, and even he understood that. And he met one devotee, and he said that your father, like a foreigner, your father was like Hiranyakashipu, but you're like Prahlad. Now, my father was like Anga, Maharaj Anga, mentioned in the 4th canto. My father was like Anga. Anga was great devotee, but he said, but I am like Vena. If you know what Vena was like, he was just horrific, just absolutely terrible. Although his father was a great devotee. So that was interesting, and he himself recognized it. But then otherwise, Advaita Acharya, Prabhupada explains in Caitanya Charitamrita, he had 6 sons. 3 were great devotees. 3 became Mayavadis. And they took the position, among other things, they took the position that our father is Advaita Acharya, and he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whenever he met our father Advaita Acharya, he would offer obeisances to him. He would accept Advaita Acharya as his senior. So, all the followers of Lord Chaitanya should accept Advaita Acharya and the followers of Advaita Acharya as their seniors. Yeah, you get the idea. So through that offense, they became Mayavadis, and they just sort of lost it, actually. Yeah. And, there are others like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 11 children. One of them was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who became the great Acharya and spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. But the next best, the rest, the other 9, we just don't really hear about. I've never heard about at all. But the next best his name was Lalita Prasad, and he was a devotee. But he was a Babaji, and he really criticized Srila Bhaktisiddhanta for being a preacher and initiating low caste people, in many cases even as Brahmins. And Prabhupada knew him. He was still living while Prabhupada was active, at least for some of the time. And there are photos of Srila Prabhupada with him, with a couple. I think Shamsundar, Prabhupada's disciple, was there. Guru Das, a couple of Prabhupada's disciples were there. And they met Lalita Prasad, and they got to know him. But Lalita Prasad, well, he was a Babaji, means just in a different space in Krishna consciousness, but just in a different space altogether. And Prabhupada wanted him. Well, Prabhupada wanted him. He was living at the birthplace of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Lalita Prasad. And Prabhupada wanted him to hand it over to ISKCON. So, we could really, in really appropriate ways, glorify Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and just spread his glories, but Lalita Prasad would not do that. Yes, so, and what to speak of the other 9, who knows? But it seems there's nothing really very worthwhile to know about them. So this material world is difficult. It's really very difficult, and actually we as aspiring devotees, we should really, in our humble little ways, try our level best somehow or other to get the mercy so we can go back to Godhead at the end of this life. Because if we don't and we take birth again, well, Hare Krishna, you never really know. And there's these examples we just mentioned of people who were devotees, but, they definitely got sidetracked due to having taken birth again within this material world. Yes, so, it's all very well to quote Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 40, and what Lord Krishna and Srila Prabhupada say about devotees who didn't become perfect, but then they got to carry on, and maybe even carry on over a few lifetimes, and then they went back to Godhead. It's all very well, but don't count on it. Don't be sort of overconfident. Yes, but anyway, these boys, 10 of them, the Prachetas anyway, will learn as things develop here in the following verses, and like that. We'll learn more about them. Very, very interesting. And they meet Lord Shiva. They're going to chant the song of Lord Shiva. Then they meet Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva really glorifies them really nicely, because they They cooperate together and serve together very nicely as devotees. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments, questions? Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.